Back to the Dean Obeidallah show. Right now, very happy to welcome to the show Rich Logis. He was a happily married father of two children, small business owner, and in 2015 became a diehard Trump supporter. But he has since broken in 2022 and is the founder and executive director of Leaving MAGA. Rich, nice to meet you, and I'm so happy you're here to tell us about Leaving MAGA, my friend.
Yeah, Dean, thank you so much for having me. It's good to be with you. As I like to start out in all of my conversations, I want to apologize to listeners for my past MAGA activism. Had I met you when I was in MAGA, I would have deemed you an existential threat to my life and livelihood in my country, and you didn't deserve to be thought of that way.
Thank you. Although I might actually have been, but now I've gotten nicer
Now
myself.
you are, right? You
But
weren't
I
then,
was,
now you are.
I probably am now an existential threat to you and your family, but for other reasons. No, so my friend, let's talk about the origin story. 2015, I read that you were not that active in politics, sort of independent, and then something about Donald Trump appealed to you. What was that?
I was someone who was political but very ignorant. I believed that the two parties were the same. And I felt that democracy had failed most Americans and that elected leaders represented, for the most part, the wealthy and the powerful. And even though Trump came from a world of wealth and influence, and yes, he ran as a Republican, but he ran as somebody who was an outsider and had no political, military, or government experience. And that was attractive to me. And I was curious at first. I wasn't one of these supporters who got on the Trump train at the when he came down the escalator. But over time, I found myself nodding in agreement on
Hmm.
some of his economic statements that he had made about jobs going overseas, once vibrant communities hollowed out. And it was in 2016, early part of the year, when I became a volunteer. And I made phone calls on behalf of the campaign. I helped write part of the call script. And after the 2016 election, I just got deeper and deeper into that world. I became a podcaster. I funded my burgeoning little MAGA media that I had, trying to get the attention of the president. I wrote for lots of MAGA friendly media. I had bylines in places like Fox and The Federalist. I spoke at Trump groups. I sponsored them. I donated to them. I worked on the 2020 campaign. I worked on Ron DeSantis's 2018 campaign as a volunteer here in Florida, where I live. So there was no mistaking my unapologetic MAGA activism.
This is unbelievable how you went from someone not really active in politics to all in, and an early part, the podcasting, and you start your own sort of media empire there. When you mentioned that he was wealthy, did that hold some appeal for certain people, that the fact that he was successful?
I think for some, certainly having a business background was enticing to me. What was more alluring, though, for me, Dean, was the fact that both parties saw him as a threat. And I, as
Hmm.
somebody who felt that the two parties were the same, I saw that as a positive. Some people might have looked at it and thought, well, if both parties feel that way, it's a negative. I felt the exact opposite. And
Interesting.
my feelings about the two parties, I don't consider them the same right now. But at one time, mistakenly and erroneously, I did think that they were the same. And I did think that Trump represented somebody who could come in and essentially obliterate the established political order. That's what I thought we needed. And it turned out that it's much easier to destroy something than it is to build it up. And I realized that the MAGA movement is really not one of democracy and democratic lowercase d institutions. It's really anathema and antithetical to democracy.
And it's interesting that when you look back, if you look back to 2008, 12, whatever, there were differences between the party. Of course, there always has been through time. But I think they became more undeniable in the time of Trump because he moved to an anti-democratic position. It wasn't even on the issues because as a populist, he did line up certain times with Democrats on certain issues. That's not even discussed. It's about the guy wants to be a king, and now we're seeing it firsthand. So let's go back. So you're there in the first term. I mean, do you remember any times that you were really like, I don't know if I should still be supporting this guy, or was it more like, I don't like this position on the issue, but I still like the guy. We don't agree with everyone on everything.
There were some moments where I criticized Trump privately, but not publicly. After Charlottesville was one example.
Mhm.
Also, the way that Trump was mismanaging the pandemic. I had several private conversations with other fellow MAGA compatriots about how Trump was botching the response to the pandemic, but I never said anything publicly because I was a devoted and devout MAGA political soldier. I did believe that we were in a good versus evil political battle, and I felt that anyone who was against us, whether they were a Democrat, a progressive, a liberal, or a Republican, if they were not with us, they were against us, and if you were 99.99% with us, you were 0% with us. So yeah, there were times that looking back on it, there were small cracks that eventually became larger cracks and as I like to say, my epiphany, which happened gradually and then suddenly all at once.
So you just touch on something that on your website you talk about it, and it's something when I've talked to other experts that are on sort of on it could be psychological, that kind of stuff, that it's MAGA is more than a political movement. It becomes your identity, becomes who you are. It's your peers, your social structure, and also your societal place where you are. Like you view yourself as having some worth because you're part of this. And could you share a little bit about how much it was hard to leave MAGA because it really is way beyond politics? It's much deeper.
It is much deeper, and I call MAGA a community. It's where people found purpose. It's where they find a sense of camaraderie and belonging. That wasn't the immediate appeal for me, but as I got deeper and deeper into MAGA, it shaped my worldview, my being, my person, my identity, and what made it so hard to leave, amongst some other reasons, is I knew that I'd be walking away from a second family, people I'd grown close with in MAGA. And as embarrassed as I am to admit this, sometimes my second family even took precedence over my own blood family. And I neglected at times some of my familial and professional duties because of my MAGA activism. And the other reason that was really hard for me to leave was that I had to painfully but liberatingly conclude that so much of what I believed, Dean, was false. And it wasn't just one or two lies that I believed. I had believed years of accumulated falsehoods and lies and conspiracies. And the process by which that transformative period of my life, which lasted for an entire year, where I vacillated between being in and out of MAGA. It's what I call my year of heaven and hell. But it got to a point where there was just one lie and one betrayal too many. And it was Ron DeSantis platforming anti-vaxxers and January 6th and Uvalde, the Texas school shooting in May 24, 2022 that eventually led to my leaving. And on August 30th of 2022, I wrote a mea culpa,
You
and I
did.
and I published it. And I said in this apology that I was sorry for my past deeds and rhetoric, and I wanted to say I was sorry to anyone I may have hurt. And the God's honest truth is that after I wrote that, I never thought anybody would care. I thought I would just publish it. It would be cathartic. I would close that chapter of my life and life would go on and I would move
Right.
on. But it turned out that quite humbly and to my surprise, people did care. And what they really cared about was trying to resurrect their relationships with their friends and family, because I was very naive and oblivious to the fact that so many relationships had been torn asunder by this movement. And it was a movement and a community that I actively helped build and I was an active participant in.
And when you were in the heart of it, and I know because you're not part of it now, so I don't want to say what the MAGA people today would do, but based on when you were in the heart of this, you were deep into MAGA. There's a level of conformity. I mean, you actually wear the same hats and shirts and do the same
Mhm.
chants. I mean, how dangerous is the movement in terms of if Donald Trump were to kill fellow Americans who oppose him, would the diehard MAGA people just defend it regardless of what the real facts are?
Well, for all the mythology of rugged individualism within the MAGA community, the fact is it is virtually a wholly conformist community. And it's also probably the most information siloed group in the country. I will tell you, Dean, that any information when I was in MAGA that even remotely refuted the pervasively held beliefs of the community was shunned. We kept it out. And in fact, I didn't believe just in a liberal media conspiracy. I actually trademarked a phrase called the Democrat media industrial complex.
Hmm.
That's how much I thought that the press was actually out to get we MAGA and Trump supporters. And there is a percentage of MAGA who will support and defend Donald Trump no matter what. But I do think that given the events of this year, whether we're talking inhumane treatment of immigrants, we're talking the Epstein files, we're talking about looking to start new military excursions overseas, I do think that there are cracks that are starting to form. And I believe that some of those chasms are going to widen over time because I think for many in MAGA, some of them are quietly having doubts right now. And as it was for me, Dean, there's one lie, there's one betrayal too many for many in MAGA, and I think that there are some who have quietly quit, and I think there are others right now who are silently questioning their belief system, and that's what Leaving MAGA really exists for as an organization is to show people a way out, give them an exit ramp, and then give them a chance to tell their story and give witness to their own experiences of being in MAGA and then leaving.
And I want to get to that in a second. I'm just curious. So when you write your mea culpa in 2022 and say you're leaving, what did you have any communications with people who were MAGA still? And what was their reaction to that?
I did let a few people know that I was leaving, and one whom I'm not in contact with anymore, he disagreed with me, but he was supportive of my decision. Another whom I was had grown close with after I told him that was other than some personal matters I was involved in with him, we never spoke again. And I knew that that would happen, and it's why it's so frightening to walk away from a group where there was camaraderie. We had events we did together. We went to birthday parties, holiday parties, events for our kids. That's what it was like being in MAGA. It was not just okay, we won and see it in 4 years. For me, it was really it was my obsession. And there was no doubting my obsession when anyone listened to my podcast or read my works or read my writings. It was very clear just how obsessed I was. And my mindset and my worldview, Dean, was very, very black and white, which unfortunately, a black and white mindset is not it's not comportable with reality because reality is multicolored. It's not black and white.
Mhm. So what was it feeding in you? Like, what did you get out of being part of MAGA? And what I mean was there some emotional fulfillment, some sense of worth that you found a mission for your life? Share with us that.
You know, I voted third party many times in my life. In fact, my first ever vote was in the year 2000 up in New York, where I'm from, for Ralph Nader.
Hmm.
And I always voted third party, except for very rare occasions I might vote for a major party candidate. And we always lost. And then yet with Trump, we had this candidate who was able to mobilize on the grassroots on the ground. And then in 2016, we literally shocked the world. And
Yeah.
finally, I was on the winning side. And I didn't want that feeling to end. I wanted to be on the victorious side. And I found in MAGA vindication. It did feed an emotional need that I had for that communal existence. And I was validated. I was appreciated and respected as this MAGA pundit trying to get the attention of Donald Trump. And that validation, those feelings of being acknowledged and seen and heard are really intoxicating. And MAGA does that for its adherents right now. It gives people a place where they do feel seen and feel heard. And I think that for some, there are some valid reasons that they might have for feeling like democracy may have let them down.
Right.
The problem, though, is that what MAGA does and what Donald Trump does is exploits those feelings. There's no solutions that are offered. And I don't defend my or anyone else's ignorance, but I think it's important, Dean, to note and acknowledge that people are susceptible to being influenced. And what Trump does to his supporters is exploits and manipulates their fears and concerns. And he's done that since day one. I didn't realize that it was being done to me when I was in MAGA, but I did come to understand it as I started going through my own road to Damascus moment with the scales falling from the eyes.
It's interesting how you put it on the human level, because to me, that's what I'm trying to get at and understand. Because I know it's not political. I know there's something deeper going on, and there's something that moves people in transcends politics. It's not about politics. People don't get it, like there's something deeper. So you leave MAGA, but it's one thing to leave MAGA. It's another thing to start an organization called Leaving MAGA. So how did you get to that?
Very accidentally. I just, I never sought out to be an activist or a public figure, but in late 2023, I just had this idea and I thought there's got to be others out there like me who have left. There's got to be people who are having doubts, who like me were confused. And I thought, okay, I need to either retire from public life or I need to do something. So I formed this organization as a nonprofit, and our mission is very ambitious. We want to empower people to leave. We want to tell their stories. We also do a lot of work with friends and family. We hold weekly support groups online for friends and family of those in MAGA. It's a place where friends and family can come and find healing, share their experiences, and better navigate the relationships with their MAGA identified close ones. And then our last part of our mission is to develop movement leaders to help others leave. And we've got some of our leaders who have taken very active public roles as spokespeople, whether they attend events,
Mhm.
do media. They want to be more proponents for the cause that we're behind. And I'm happy to report, Dean, that we have never been busier. We have more testimonials we're working on. We are meeting people now who were 2024 MAGA supporters who left in 2025. And we're even meeting people who are in MAGA right now who are struggling.
Hmm.
And we are providing support for them. So they are out there. I want listeners to know that as frustrating as it can be, and I'm exasperated a lot, and I wish that it happened faster, but there are people who are coming around. And I would ask those who have friends and family in MAGA, please don't give up on your close friends, your loved one. Let them know that if they ever have doubts themselves, that they can turn to you as a friendly ear. Because what's also scary, Dean, about leaving
Mhm.
is we're afraid to be judged and
Sure.
ostracized. And apologizing is not really a natural act for us as a species. But if people know that they can walk away without fear of recrimination, then it makes it more likely for them to say, yes, I made a mistake. I erred in my ways and I want to now leave behind this movement. It doesn't fit any longer with my own values.
So if there is, so let's get specific. If somebody says, I've got a loved one or a friend, they are MAGA, and I've been trying to get them to see the light. What's the right approach? And I know there's no silver bullet. I imagine each person's different, but is there overarching a correct approach to lean in and to talk to them?
In addition to our support group, something that we do is we've got on our website, which people can find at leavingmaga.org, there is what we call reaching out. It's a guide we put together, and it's don'ts and do's on how to approach your MAGA identified close ones. So you want to avoid, for example, you want to avoid facts and policy. Facts and policy do not move people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People are emotional beings. We make decisions on feelings and perceptions and emotions, and so does MAGA. MAGA is just as emotional as any group. I know that they'll use phrases like blank your feelings, but there are plenty of feelings within MAGA. Trust me, I know I lived it for 7 years, so I can attest to that.
Right.
But then there's some do's, which is one do that we like to encourage is what we call information bartering, and and what that is someone in MAGA will read an article or some news or opinion from someone who's not in MAGA, and they exchange articles and they agree to read the other person's content and then have a discussion about the facts of each of them. And I've I've had that occur with people in MAGA. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't always go very far, and for a lot of people in MAGA, they may not agree to it. But if there are willing parties for information bartering, we can exchange articles, and people can at least get the person in MAGA can at least get a differing view
Mhm.
from the right wing MAGA media that they're consuming because that's what I that's what I consume, Dean. That's all I read and wrote and watched was right wing MAGA media. That's it. It was after it was during the course of my doubting that I diversified my news and information sources. And after I did that and I started incorporating non-MAGA media, that's when I started to realize, wow, a lot of what I believe may not actually be true. And it was painful to really conclude that, but it was necessary.
But in your case, or in the cases you've seen where people actually have left MAGA, is there has to be a willingness already to question it, question the dogma, and to be potentially open to change, as opposed to someone who's a diehard 100%, they love Trump no matter what you say. Exchanging a document with them, has it worked with those people, or is it more those who are like on the path that you were already on, where there are questions being raised? You're
It's
not.
more who are, yeah, it's more who are curious because something that we talk about in our support groups is that we want people to relieve themselves of the pressure of trying to change their MAGA friend or loved one because the change, Dean, only comes from the individual.
Right.
You know, no one is going to, no one would have changed me when I was in MAGA. And the more someone tried to change me, the more I would have dug my heels in. You know, it's why we avoided Leaving MAGA, for example, talking about MAGA as a cult, because we don't want to give people a reason to stay in MAGA. And our experience has been that when people in MAGA are referred to as cultists, it makes them even more fervent in their support. And we want to extract people out of MAGA. We don't want to give them a reason to stay. When I was in MAGA, we used to say the outside world is the cult, you know, and the outside world are the crazies. So then you've got everybody calling each other cultists and crazies, and there's just this circuitous toxic loop where everyone is just dehumanizing one another. And it's why we avoid the cult language, even though I understand why people might think that because they look at their friends and loved one and think that there's no reaching them. But there are ways of reaching them, but we have to be patient because the ones who leave, they go through those initial stages of doubt. And we at Leaving MAGA encourage them to listen to those doubts, to listen to their conscience, because usually it's that doubt is begotten by one lie or one betrayal too many, and we want them to see through the process of really questioning their own belief system and challenging their own selves.
After you left MAGA, did you reconnect with any friends or family members that you had severed ties with, or that they ties had ended between you?
I did. I reached out to several friends I had lost touch with, and
Mhm.
these were longtime friends, and I apologized to them
Hmm.
for saying to them that I lumped them into this category of existential threats. And all of them accepted my apology, and one in particular, Dean, who was very influential in my life and was very instrumental during my college years in helping me grow and mature as a man. He said to me, Rich, I always knew that you'd come back.
Hmm.
And I say that because they didn't give up on me.
Right.
And we don't want, and it's why I really strongly implore friends and family of those in MAGA to not give up on their close ones as well, because I do believe for many of them, there's going to come a point where they're going to reach a red line. And when they reach that red line, it's when they're going to start to go through this process of really questioning their beliefs and wondering if MAGA is exactly what it is that they thought they were supporting.
And one political question here, you know, at some point Trump is going to be off the scene, just the terms up, or he passes on, and JD Vance is talked about as the heir apparent. Is there any sense you can give us from MAGA? Will they gravitate to him and support him as devoutly as they do for Donald Trump?
When Donald Trump is off the political scene, MAGA is not going, it's not that MAGA will go away, but it will unravel.
Mhm.
And I don't, and that's good news, because that means that there are going to be millions of people we have an opportunity to catch
Right.
before they get subsumed into whatever comes next after MAGA, whether it's America First or it's what I call a technocracy, which is what JD Vance would try to usher in with tech bros. I don't see JD Vance though as having the ability to corral MAGA supporters the way Trump has. What Trump has done very effectively is he took right-wing politics that have existed for decades, for generations, and he branded them. And as the person who branded it, that's why he's the titular leader of the movement and of the community. So no one is really able to supplant him and have the effect that he has had for now over 10 years. It's not JD Vance, it's not Marco Rubio.
Right.
You know, they might, one of them might be endorsed by Trump and will have the support of MAGA, but the excitement that comes with being in MAGA, I think, is greatly diminished once Trump's off the political scene.
That's interesting to hear that. And last thing, Rich. So, what do you say now? Not too many people who listen to MAGA tune into my show. Some do just to fight with me, but it's kind of rare, to be honest. But the real thing is, what is one piece of advice you would give to people who are listening, who know friends or family members who are in MAGA to make a difference? And is it go to your website? Is it talk to them in nicer terms and don't call them, dumb AF? And that kind of, I mean, like, what's the one piece of advice you would give to those people?
You know, I'll say for anyone who's listening to this who is in MAGA, I believe deep down that you're a good person who, like me, was led astray.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who have friends and family, my advice to them is, and apologies for the repetition, but my advice is do not give up on your friends and relatives. Somewhere in there is that person who existed before Donald Trump and MAGA came on the scene. And we want to be there as a friendly ear for them. And whether that's showing them my story or showing them the stories of others, people can read other testimonials at our site at leavingmaga.org. We've got nearly 24 other stories of people who left and went through their own transformative experience. But don't give up on them. Let them know that you love them, that you care about them. But if they ever start to have doubts, that they can turn to you as a confidant and a friendly ear.
That's very helpful because it is the human connection. And I'm glad earlier you made the point. It's not about debating politics or here's policy or here's a fact. That's not going to change them. It's something deeper. And it's really, they have to want to change. Sort of like a character in a movie. Like that's, if they don't want to change, they're not going to evolve. So again, the website's leavingmaga.org or .com.
Yes, leavingmaga.org.
Leavingmaga.org. So again, if you have family member or friends, or if you're listening and you're in MAGA, why don't you go check out leavingmaga.org. Read it. You're not going to change. It's not a threat to you. You never know. You like it, you don't like it. Who knows? But I do say this, Rich, in closing, I believe I do want people to evolve for the better. So it's not like once you're a MAGA, that's it. You're dead to us. If people do evolve and we can play a role in that, that's better for the country going forward to prevent another Donald Trump or another Trump-like character from becoming president. And so, Rich, well, thank you so much for making time and going through all of this and sharing your story and the website so people can check it out. And I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
My pleasure, Dean. Thank you for having me.